Good evening. Thank you for having me back, Greta.
It's nice to see you, Senator. Senator, the numbers are staggering. 82 deadlines were examined by the CRS, which is a nonpartisan organization branch of our government. And it says in year one that 9 out of 12 deadlines were missed, year one of Obamacare. Year two, 22 of 53 were missed. Year three, they missed 10 of 17 for a total of 41 out of about 82 deadlines. Your thought about that?
Remarkable. I think this is one of the obvious signs that Obamacare is doomed to fail. I think if we think about the delays holistically, we ought to consider four facets of the delays. The first part are the delays themselves. The second part is the timing of some of the delays. The third thing I would talk about is the authority for delays. And the fourth, how do they communicate these delays to the American people? I know they've used blogs. They've embedded some of the delays in 600 pages of regulations. You think about the timing of the employer mandate being delayed. This destroys the 40-hour work week. So what do? They wait until 2015, which is not an election year, for us to have a serious conversation with employers and employees about the number of hours that each employee will be able to work, or the reduction of 25% of some employees' paychecks. Think about the fact that the foundation of Obamacare in and of itself is a delay. We collect revenues for 10 years, and the so-called benefits are only for 6 years. 10 years of new revenues and fees, premiums, and higher taxes, but the so-called benefits are only for 6 years, and they call that balancing. So I think when we think through the notion of delays, it's not simply the fact that we're talking about the employer mandate being delayed a year or the out-of-pocket expense being delayed.
Well, one of the things the Congressional Research Service says is that most of these deadlines are not for mission-critical features of the law. But I think that those delays just show a level of incompetence and that they haven't delivered what they promised. So I think that's the level of sort of just bureaucratic incompetence. But a number of the rules, according to CRS, a number of rules that would safeguard the privacy of medical records have either yet to be developed or have been meaningful tardy in their arrival. And that's a little bit about what we're talking about with sort of the navigators having access to personal information, not having background checks. But what we're also learning is that they aren't ready for the safeguard of the privacy of medical records. That's not a sort of insignificant feature of the bill.
Very significant. As we think through all of the delays holistically, what we realize is that Obamacare is too complex, too big, and certainly too expensive. So what we're seeing today is the realization of what we all feared, and that is simply that at some point the whole notion of Obamacare will implode, and it will leave the taxpayers of America beholden to something that they don't understand, they didn't ask for, and they can't afford. And so when we think about the impact of certain things like the SHOP exchanges or the small business exchanges being delayed by another year because, frankly put, they are unprepared to go forward with it. Even states are now delaying their implementation of their exchange websites.
How can the government sort of have the gall or the audacity to penalize people for not doing the individual mandate when they themselves are not ready with what was promised for us? Just sort of on simple breach of contract. They promised to have these exchanges set up. They promised that they would have privacy rules in effect so that we'd feel comfortable. They promised all this. Well, it looks like they haven't done that. They're not going to get to it. They even have sort of lame effort, not even checking out the backgrounds of the navigators. Yet they expect the rest of us to comply. Why do and if we don't, we get penalized.
Greta, there's no common sense in any of the things that you just said, and that's why you're the host of this show, because you're smart and you're right. The frustrating part for those of us who are paying attention to this meandering process of the implementation of the rollout of Obamacare is we are just several weeks, 6 weeks or so, away from the beginning of the exchanges, so to speak, October 1st. We're still writing the regulations, 30,000 pages, 7 feet, 3 inches tall of a regulatory environment still being created this day. How can we understand the consistency or the lack of contradictions in that regulatory environment if it's not even completed yet? And then there are facets of the entire regulatory process that says we're going to trust you on your income. So the verification provisions simply say that if you have 400% of poverty or 300% of poverty, you get 2 different types of credits, 2 different types of preferences. Because we are not prepared to move forward, we're going to say, you tell us, we'll believe you, trust you on this one. I think it just speaks to the lack of true policy making that we saw when you passed the bill and then read it to see what's in it. This is a nightmare.
Well, I think that before the government impose upon us a compliance requirement, the government ought to comply with its own rules and what it said it would do. But I don't have any influence on that one. Senator, as always, thank you.
Thank you very much.